Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Buddy Study Group. And today we are going to talk about finding the fit. And what that means is really finding the right product fit for your client. There is a ton that goes into this, but in the nature of keeping things relatively simple and topical, I'm going to kind of break it down to the art and the science because I believe there's a little bit of both in finding the right solution for a client. And I think the right solution is also very subjective. And I think I think in the past there were an unbelievable amount of options for long-term care. In the middle, we were kind of limited on options, and now we're getting back to a place where we've got tons and tons of options out there for clients, right? So, how do we kind of toe that fine line of letting them know all that's available to them, allowing them to make a choice that feels like their choice, that's guided by your recommendations without, hitting this sort of overwhelm plateau where they may start either losing interest or losing the stamina required to see the process all the way through and end up with something that they feel comfortable with at the end of the day. So there's a lot to manage there, a lot that we go through in trying to guide clients to that decision. And I think part of this, as I'm kind of talking through these concepts and showing you some of the tools that we have available that help kind of boil that down for folks, I would love to hear how many of you manage that process. I think everybody has a different process. I think the principles that I'll go over will very likely apply to you, but everybody has their own sort of nuances to their process that I think could be helpful for everybody to learn from. So, as I'm going through, if you have an approach that works particularly well for you, I would love to hear it so that we can all kind of learn from each other. But as I kind of went through, there is an art and a science to this stuff, right? We have tons of options and very little time and very little attention span that we're dealing with. Believe it or not, clients do not roll out of bed in the morning and say, "Oh boy, I get to pick out my long-term care insurance policy today, and I know exactly which one I want." That's very unlikely to happen. Some people may go their whole career without something like that happening. Some of us may get lucky, right? But at the end of the day, it is about two really important pieces. The science to me of product selection and finding the right fit is filtering, right? We have 30 plus long-term care, short-term care, or alternative products that are out there, and they're not going to be available to every client. Right out of the box, there are plenty that may not be available to a specific client, depending on who you're across the table from, right? There are all sorts of product limitations and things that carriers will consider and will not consider. And the most important exercise you can do to avoiding overwhelm for yourself is quickly filtering out what is absolutely not available to a client, right? And there are plenty of factors that you can look at to determine that, right? Think of the most basic. Age is a huge one, right? If we are in a certain age group, if we're too old or too young, we're not going to qualify for some products. State is another very limiting factor. New Yorkers, if you can hear me, state tends to be a huge, huge factor in what's available and what's not. Some states offer short-term care products, some don't. If you are in a state that doesn't, guess what? Short-term care doesn't need to be part of your conversation, right? Um, and I think another huge kind of less binary item is health and wealth, right? That's so age and state are things that we really cannot change, and that carriers generally do not change very much. Now, new products are an exception because sometimes there are states we're waiting on for approval, but age and state are things that the client generally cannot change and the carriers don't change very often as far as availability. So those are very binary. It's one or zero. Is it available to the client or is it not? Health and wealth are a bit more, there's a bit more work to determine whether or not something's available to a client. And really, at the end of the day, like an overarching concept of this process is it is all down to how well you fact find up front. That's going to determine how easy the rest of the process is. The more information or the more efficiently you take in the most important information is really going to determine kind of the speed and ease of the process from the client's perspective, right? Because everybody says there's a little bit of information I'm going to need from you first before we can really move on and get to something that works for you, right? See if we can find a plan for you. Some of you may have some sort of intake funnel where people are filling out that form and giving you that information. That makes things a lot more efficient too. But once you have that information, we need to, number one, once we understand kind of what we're working with from the perspective of assets and income, and do we have any inheritances? What kind of financial vehicles do we have that are out there? What are they kind of earmarked for? Are they accomplishing the goals we want them to accomplish, right? Once we kind of understand, um, the wealth perspective, we will get an idea. We may absolutely filter out some carriers, some product types, right? If we don't really have the sort of cash or asset that we can pull from to really, make a single premium or a 10 pay or something of that nature. Like a single premium would probably take annuity off the books for sure, unless there's an existing annuity. Um, Hybrid plans may be a go, they may be not. So it's not as binary. Health can be binary, health can also be subjective, right? It could be up to underwriter's discretion. So if I have a very specific condition that I know precludes me from a few carriers, that could be binary, but I could have something like diabetes that's going to vary based on the level of control, fasting blood sugar levels, A1C readings. So that's part of the argument for the camp of the better we fact find up front, the easier the process is going to be because we can take that information and spit it straight out to the underwriter, right? Um, but overall, I think health and wealth are another kind of part of the science where we're filtering out as many options as we can. We don't want to really get to the presentation stage with 11 carriers. Just imagine how long that process is going to go, not just for you to walk through each of those options, but then as a client, you have to take that home and you have to sort through it. I don't know, honey. These are like, 1% different from each other. So what do we even use to determine? And then all of a sudden you've got the clients wheels spinning way too much. And individual long-term care, the average sales cycle is 6 to 18 months unless you've got somebody who's got their mind made up. So it's going to make it even longer, or it's just going to cut it off right there, right? It's like way too much. It's not simple to make this decision. It's simple to not make the decision. The cost to me of not making the decision is lowered because of how much I have to go through to actually get to a final decision. So I think the more you narrow it down responsibly, of course, is really going to kind of determine how the rest of the process goes. So you want to get the binary things out of the way. What am I taking off the plate of discussion? And what are the things that are probably close to taking off of the plate of the discussion, right? I think that is part of the science, like one or zero. But then we start to get into the art of things, right? And there are a number of things that can go into the art of finding the right product fit. So being able to ask good questions and listen to me is an art. It's a skill. So being able to, once you have all of their financial information, maybe they have the ability to do a lot of different things, right? Product wise. So it's up to us to actually go ahead and ask, like, as far as paying a premium for any plan that you might find yourself in, what do you prefer? Do you prefer a pay-as-you-go premium that's a monthly deduction from your bank account, like other things you're familiar with? Would you rather not have to pay a consistent bill for your whole life or out to age 65 or eight to age 100? Would you rather pay it up in one shot? Or do you feel like you don't like either extreme and maybe I'd like to pay it up in 10 years? Right? So asking about preferences helps narrow things down as well because clients I think will be able to be a little bit flexible, but if you ask for preferences on some of those general things where they have a lot of options, it'll narrow it down. If it's out of the client's preferences, then it's probably good to toss aside and not make part of that final presentation. Um, I think the essence of avoiding overwhelm in itself is an art. So I think you have to understand who it is you're talking to. It's okay to try to understand it for yourself just listening to the client talk, but I also think it's okay to ask. Are you a bit more analytical? Do you like spreadsheets? Do you like numbers? Do you like figures? Or are you somebody who is compelled a little bit more, by stories, by conversation, right? Understanding how they work best will help you understand how to present, and that will make the process more efficient of actually finding the right product fit. 'Cause somebody is going to be able to make an easier decision by looking at three carriers on a spreadsheet, and some people are going to be able to make a decision easier when you actually kind of walk them through and tell them the story. Maybe a couple helpful diagrams will do the trick too. But at the end of the day, people also learn differently. So figuring out that piece really helps you cut down on, clients kind of reaching that critical mass of I can't do this anymore. I'm exhausted by this process. When you can see it on some people's faces in their body language. When you reach that exhaust, you've lost them. It's going to be super, super hard to get them back. I mean, are we going to write them an email that says, I promise I'll make things simpler next time? It's just we have to keep from hitting that point at all costs. So the more we can kind of figure out about who they are, the better job we do in that introductory meeting. Again, whether it's art, whether it's science, we're feeding the rest of the process with that. And then I think it's also, leaning on carriers, or if you work with a BGA, your BGA can help you sort some of these items out and help you with the science. And some of it's leaning on sales tools, right? So our tech and our experts or the people that we turn to can really help us with the science pieces. They can tell you some of the things that maybe you need to know, but maybe the client doesn't need to know, right? Or some of the extra little pieces that you need to have in your back pocket for the conversation, but you might not readily offer straight away because there's, again, only limited time for trying to spit out every little fact about every little option we've narrowed this down to. Again, you're going to reach that point of exhaustion. Of course, you can always be there to answer any questions they have, and people will start asking more questions at different parts of the process, depending on who they are. So I think there's an art in streamlining the conversation, right? So I think all of that upfront work matters so, so much. And also, I just want to make it clear that for you all, as the ones who are putting these presentations together and going through them with clients, you have to avoid overwhelm on your own part, right? Because how much time can we spend realistically if we're meeting with 20 clients and prospects a week on each individual presentation? That's why people develop processes right? So they can have kind of a streamlined way of being able to address each case. Um, so just how you kind of organize yourself. Um, but once you've kind of done the filtering, what's available, what's not, you want to offer some education on the different product types too, because you want a chance to lay some information out there quickly, simply, and then you want to observe, right? I think a lot of this and a lot of the art about it is like laying out options and seeing how people react. Some people may come out and say, "Oh, I like that. I'm drawn to this." What happens if we look at this? You've shown me this, but what happens if we look at this? Picking up on those subtle or unsubtle indications of preference are going to help you narrow down the options as well. Some people may come forward and be like, the most important thing to me is this. Now that we've had this little discussion here, the most important thing to me is that I can get a 10 pay, right? That helps you narrow things down. That's great. We can just focus on 10 pays, right? So I think that's how I see things from just a conceptual perspective. Understand that information intake is everything. It's so important to the rest of the process. And then you need to run it through the science, which is filtering the carriers that won't be part of or the products that won't be part of the conversation. And then it's down to the art and asking good questions and figuring out the client's preferences so that when you narrow it down to two, three, four carriers, whatever it may be, you're confident that you are kind of narrowing those down based on the client preferences. That's how you kind of get to yourself to a streamlined, efficient path where you feel comfortable what you're recommending, and whatever the client walks away with, they'll be comfortable with what they have. So that's how I see things conceptually. I see Chris put in the chat, he started using water lily for intake. I've heard a couple of people starting to use water lily. If you don't mind, what are some of the things that you like about water lily, and how does it enhance your intake process? What information does it give you that's really helpful to getting to a good product fit? If you're still with us. Sometimes we have folks who stop in and have to go. I hope we didn't lose you. We may have. Oh yeah, I see he's no longer here. Well, if he hops back on and I see him, I'll ask him. Does anybody else use water lily out there? If you do, feel free to raise your hand. I would love to learn a bit more, but I know there's a lot of like financial qualification that water lily can do, and some cost of care assessments. Uh, Water lily may be a separate sort of discussion for another day. Maybe we could have Lily on, but it's really sort of think about it as high level as I can describe it, as kind of like a qualification process using questionnaires, asking clients really good questions to kind of get a better idea about them, their suitability for long-term care from many different standpoints, while also providing a little bit of education along the way. At a high level, that's what I can kind of give you on Water Lily. So maybe we'll contact Lily to see if she's available for a study group one day. That might be a good one. Um, I'm going to share my screen because we have a couple of tools that can kind of help, especially with the science side of the process, but a little bit of the art too. So if you haven't seen this is our individual product buddy tool. And what this is designed to do is take a few inputs for whatever client you're in front of, and it helps you narrow down and recommend different product types and carrier solutions. Okay, so for example, if I am meeting with a 60-year-old client and I am, let's see, let's say state of California, because California has some filtering properties to it. Um, Health assessment, we'll keep it at excellent for now. preferred funding, let's say I have to be kind of pay as you go. So what Product Buddy will do is it will actually filter out product types that cannot offer what you've put in here as preferences, and it will recommend some carriers for each of the different product categories it does recommend. So you may notice one thing. Let's go to a state that has it. You notice when I put Kansas, short-term care shows. And California is a state where short-term care is not available. So when I go to California, it cuts off short-term care. Now, let's say I put any for preferred funding, you see annuity long-term care is there. If I put pay-as-you-go, annuity long-term care drops off, right? So by using this, you can kind of boil the science down super quick with relation to product types. Okay. And get a couple of recommendations. Okay. Given that I have this client in this state and they want to pay as you go premium, I am looking at traditional long-term care or a life hybrid, right? And based on the state I'm in, especially helpful if you work with folks beyond just who's local to you and you work in a bunch of different states, you'll get product recommendations based on the state as well. So if a carrier is not available in a specific state, you're not going to see them on there. So what this can also do is help you a little bit with the art, because when you cycle through the different product types, you're going to get a one pager based on what product type you've selected. And I think this, even though it is a jam-packed PDF, but if I'm looking at a traditional long-term care candidate, I can hand them this one pager to kind of educate them on what is traditional long-term care all about. Who might be the best suited for these types of products, though suitability may be a bit wider than this. How sort of healthy do we have to be at a baseline, knowing that we can give or take a little bit on this slider to qualify for traditional products? And why do we look at traditional long-term care? So this kind of helps us streamline the product type education. And we can, of course, download multiple and say, hey, we're going to go through a couple of options here. We're going to go through traditional and we're going to go through hybrid long-term care. And we're going to, through this discussion, kind of understand, the benefits, the strengths and weaknesses of each. And from there, if you feel like you like both, I'll show you representations from a couple of carriers for each. And if you like just one, we'll kind of just go in that direction, right? So for hybrid life, you can see ideal candidates, around ages 40 to 65, but overall it's available to folks ages 30 to 80, depending on carrier, depending on state availability. Preferred funding, this is generally for folks who like a policy paid up early, either all at once or, over limited pay, like 10, 5, 7 years, whatever it may be. Here's kind of their financial profile, some of their goals, and why do we look at hybrid long-term care? We've got the versatility, right? Live, die, or quit. Caregiving options. So many of these hybrid plans have started coming out with cash indemnity plans that allow you to reimburse friends, family members, or really altogether under the umbrella of informal caregivers. There's not a requirement that you have to pay for professional care. Streamlined underwriting. Generally, we end up with quicker underwriting decisions. And in many cases, sort of a less intrusive underwriting process. So that may vary by carrier, but generally we end up with pretty quick underwriting decisions and a less intrusive underwriting process, especially if you're younger. As we mentioned, you've got the premium flexibility, right? You can pay it up all in one shot. You can pay as you go for life or somewhere in the middle. You can have joint survivorship plans, and you can have two individual policies with a couple's discount and then inflation protection, right? So keeping this education very, very simple. I think sometimes without something to work off of like this, we can tend to take things in so many different directions. right? But to give kind of that initial introduction to the product type, I think is super important, and doing it at a high level that you can kind of go through these items, educate the client, and watch how they react to each one, right? At the end of the day, as you're making those comparisons. And better yet, you can leave the client with these PDFs so that they can be reminded of the conversation that you've had with them, right? So, just as a reminder, we talked about traditional long-term care and hybrid long-term care products. Here are, two one-page sheets that will kind of help refresh your memory on some of the key points of each that we went over, right? So, we're making that education quick by using this, but we're not necessarily glossing over things. And we're doing some of the science, right? We're doing some of the filtering. So that's really kind of what we had in mind with this tool. And for the carrier that's kind of the primary over here, we have some bullet points about that product. What are some highlights about this product? Why might this be a good product for us to work with? Or what are some of the specs we need to know about this? So I think this is an incredibly useful tool if you want quick answers or if you want quick presentation materials on a product type or both, right? So I think this tool really helps me when people ask me questions about clients to come up with a client fit because we're sorting on things that are um, for the most part, very binary. Now, health assessment is going to be a little bit subjective. I suggest you play around with this a little bit and understand what carriers might go away, what carriers might show up if you filter from excellent to average, substandard to poor. Obviously, in different states, you're going to get different experiences with being able to look at certain short-term care products, and the like. So, um, highly recommend you check out that tool for clients, even if you're an experienced specialist, if you feel like the filtering is just super important. Hey, is this product available in this state? Yada yada for this age. I think it's an important tool to help you sort through things. I also think AI Advisor can be quite helpful here in just kind of getting you some quick answers, right? So maybe I don't know everything I need to know about this client. Maybe I'm just like looking for a couple directions to go in. So I have a client who is a 64-year-old female in New York with diabetes. What might she be able to access for products? And at least get some initial ideas. Now, you may do more research and find out, well, actually, this might not be a good direction for me to go in. Um, but understanding that AI Advisor has given me, oh, I got to know the difference between diabetes with insulin, diabetes without insulin. It gives me kind of some suggested A1C readings. It's giving me ideas of good questions that I need to ask, right? Other considerations. What carriers may be available to her in New York? And you can just continue to have a conversation and follow up and come away with a couple of ideas. Now here it's recommending Mutual of Omaha, Bright House, Bankers Life. So we have a couple of directions we can go in to now start asking questions, right? And it even takes things a step further and gives you a link that will take you to our sales guides, right? And this is where you can get a lot of information as well about what's available, right? It'll give you some age ranges, it'll give you some payment types that are available, some product highlights. But I had a conversation with AI Advisor. It said I should maybe check out Mutual of Omaha, check out Bright House, check out Bankers. So we could say, find each of these pages and get some of the more deep dive product specs, right? And search for maybe further information in here that will help us understand if we actually want to recommend this. We can go back to the sales guide and check out Bright House, for example. Oh, I see we have a carrier contact here. We can contact Matt McCormick and maybe run some of the health details by that we have learned. Maybe we should ask about their A1C. Maybe we should ask if they use insulin. Maybe we should ask the level of control, right? And this makes us a bit more educated to be able to go to underwriters and ask, is this an option for my client or not? That's also how we filter. That's part of the science, leaning on your carriers. Um, so I just wanted to show those tools as kind of ways that, you know, we help filter down options that we use ourselves. Benefit Buddy can also be one of those options. Hey, do I like the value of what I'm getting? Um, let's see. Let's see what we've got. We can show at least traditional and hybrid side by side and say, do I like the value that I'm getting out of this plan versus another based on who I am, right? I'm not going to do a deep dive on Benefit Buddy, but this is something as well that you can use to generate those reactions, right? And get an idea of preference. I think that's kind of the major piece of the art side. So, science side is filtering down what is available, what is not, yes or no. The art side is avoiding overwhelm and educating in an efficient way that will allow the client to indicate some level of preference, which you can then use for putting your options together. So that's just like conceptually from the perspective of sales tools, um, technology, and just the art of being a long-term care specialist. That's how I see things boiling down, finding the right product fit, whether it's art, whether it's science. I think they're both super, super important pieces to the process. Now I want to see from those of you who are out there. What are some techniques that you guys use to help clients make a decision, help them find the product fit that's right for them? Um, any little tiny nuance or idiosyncrasy about your process could be helpful to somebody on the call. So I wanted to see if there's anybody out there who is willing to volunteer any piece of their process that I might have left out, I might not have covered. Let's see what we got in the chat. More people talking about water lily. I thought that was a great recommendation. Plenty of tools that help with that. Um, let's see. Out of curiosity, David Marks, are you with us? Are you able to help share with me how you help find product fits for your client? No, I guess we got a snoozer. How about you, Diane? Are you available to give us 2 seconds on how you find product fits for your
Yeah,
clients?
maybe.
I mean, you're good at it, but you kind of I think your method is sort of show and look for reactions, kind of like I was going over. But I could be wrong. There could be something different you're using.
Yeah, well, I start with the ask and listen. I don't want to show them stuff that they absolutely are not going to be interested in. So I want to, I, one of my things is I really want to be able to understand them and I want to make it easier for them to want to share with me what I need. And that's hard to do
It is.
because if you ask questions the wrong way, you get shut down and like, why do you need to know that? So you have to talk to them in their language and you have to gently move them in the direction that you need them to move to get to where you are able to say, okay, I can come up with some ideas to present to you.
Yep.
So part of that is one of the hardest parts that I had to learn years ago was how to ask them about their money without them saying, I'm not going to tell you anything about my money. So
Right. Right.
so when I get to that part, really one of the things that I'll always talk to them about, I'll say, and I'll tell them ahead of time, hey, this is the stuff we're going to talk about today. I need to understand you. You need to understand what's out there, and we need to make all those pieces fit. and that makes it a little bit easier for them. But when and I'll tell them I'm going to be asking about a general information about your finances because we need to understand first what are we protecting, and we need to find the wisest way to do that. So when we get to the area where I'm talking and asking them about money, they already know I'm going to do it. So the shock is gone from the beginning to where I'm actually asking the questions about, 10 minutes later.
Right.
And always start, I learned this, I don't remember who taught it, always start with the stuff that you can't touch. Like we can't touch any of it, but they think we can.
Mm,
So ask them, do you own your home? Is it paid for? You're not going to reach through the computer and go take their house from them. Um, Ask them about their income and their social security because it's there. They're going to get it and it's there, and you can't take it. Even though you can't, they think they know you can't.
right.
And then start asking them about, well, tell me about, when do you expect to retire? What do you think your net worth will be at the time of retirement outside of your house? And now you're gradually leaning into that stuff so that they're telling, and you're never going to get all the information until you build a relationship with them. So you're always guessing a little bit, like, are they telling me everything or not,
Yeah.
But it gives you a better idea of, and one of the funny things that I learned, I don't know, just through doing this for so many years is the people that are afraid to tell you how much money they have are usually the ones that don't have any money.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that. So, brilliant answer. That was super helpful. I think you drilled down on some of the pieces that I kind of spoke to on a higher level. Um, but I think you kind of gave some art and science elements. And now just thinking back, I probably should have made a chart and put art and science and probably had everybody categorize them. Maybe we'll do that sometime soon. Some exercise like that. But I think you gave a lot that is based around psychology and not like I'm gonna psychoanalyze you and I'm gonna have a profile of you done, right? But understanding what you do every day, understanding it in the shoes of the clients that you talk to every day, right?
Right.
Establishing comfort and rapport is an essential piece to even being able to get the information. I love the little piece about like, let's talk about the things they know I'm not gonna, try to touch or work with, right? First, to
Hmm.
kind of make sure that they're comfortable with the process. But I also love just the conversation up front that says, here are some of the things that I'm gonna ask, and here is why it's essential for me to do a good job for you. There are going to be some questions that I am bound by regulation to ask you about, right? I need to prove financial suitability. That's part of my duty and due diligence as an insurance professional to make sure that people aren't getting set up with products that are just not suitable financially, right? So I think that is at at times art, at times science
Hmm.
is real. I think the art is understanding what you do with it and how you're actually able to observe what's being given off to you as you're having a discussion, especially on Zoom, right? Being able to understand body language and where somebody's at, even if they won't kind of tell you right away or up front, is
Hmm.
even harder when it's between computer screens as opposed to across the table, right?
Right, right. But sometimes you're talking to one spouse and the other one you can see them back on the couch in the back of the room. And then partway through the conversation, they get closer and they come up and you're like, oh, I'm bringing them in. Yay. All right.
Right, right.
So you feel
Yeah.
like, okay, they're feeling some value here. So that's kind of fun.
Anything like that, like a 2-degree lean in the chair. I mean,
Hmm.
it's not like we're gonna base our whole decision making off of, he leaned forward a little bit, right? But they're little things that signify interest. So maybe my next question stays in the same department, right? So I can continue to find out more about what they think of what I've just kind of taken them through,
Right,
right?
right. Yeah, and then another thing, when I'm starting to show them, I use the Benefit Buddy, so I show them the without a company name, here's
Hmm.
some ideas. Um, And in the past, I would just show them, hey, this is, and you're talking to somebody who you're going to sell them a traditional policy unless there's information they haven't shared with you, which sometimes happens. But I always want to show them the hybrids as well, just briefly, even if they don't want them. I'll say, I just want to show you how they compare so that you have a whole big picture. Because other times when I haven't done that, I show them what I think they tell me that they want, and then they come back later and said, "Well, my financial advisor said they're going to move $68,000 from my cash value of my life insurance policy and buy me a hybrid plan. How come you didn't tell me about those?"
For sure.
So you have to show it, even though you think they're not
Yep.
going to want it, because somebody else is going to show it.
And that's like part of what we had in mind for a mentality when we were making Product Buddy. Something filters out of the list of available options if it is absolutely not available based on some sort of binary characteristic. And, you have it out there otherwise because even if you believe somebody's preference is X, Y, or Z, or even if you believe their health may preclude them from X, Y, or Z, you want to be able to show them the product types to understand what you're going to end up recommending relative to other solutions out there.
Hmm.
And yeah, I totally agree about safeguarding yourself against competitive scenarios because I think probably the number one way that people win business from someone else is well, did they show you this? Well, they must not have been doing a very holistic job, or they must not have shopped the market, as well as they said they were going to do,
Hmm.
right? I think that's one of the number one ways to say, hey, come over here. I can show you that. So I think that's where it's really hard to strike a balance between you got to show them all you got to kind of make them aware of, what's out there without overwhelming them. So if it takes a one pager, if it takes, any other materials you have, if it takes sort of here's a sheet that kind of shows you all the different product types and, we can go through each one by one, but I want to make sure that you have information on all of this in your hands because
Right. So then we can start to weed them out and figure out
yes,
what the right way is. Yeah.
yes, I can give you two sentences each on how kind of each product works. And if it's like, not for me, then we at least have the information. We can file it away. Um, but if it's of interest, okay, we'll keep it on the kind of like finalist pile and we'll drill down a little bit deeper.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah, I think that's a super good point. I was just going to say something else. I thought I had something great lined up to say, and I just flat out forgot it. So, does anybody else have any elements to their process or little things? Let's see. We actually have questions in the chat. Lynn asked two questions. How much has anybody seen employees build a separate policy on top of, say, a group plan since they might need or require longer benefits? I think group has come around or really has been reborn quite recently. So the given the built-in sort of average sales cycle of individual long-term care, which we all know here is a bit longer on average than other plans. I mean, think about long-term care versus a term life policy, right? Like those sales cycles are completely polar opposite. But I don't think we truly have enough empirical data to know yet how many people will purchase an individual plan on top of a group plan. I have a feeling that we will see that quite a bit, especially from, uh, not to toot our own horn, but like groups that we work with because we educate on that specifically. We say that, hey, this group plan represents a starter plan. A couple of things it may not have is inflation protection to keep up with the rising cost of care, though some products may. And depending on your family history, health, whatever it may be, you may need a longer benefit, you may need more benefit, or you may want to have more benefit. So individual planning is how we fill in the gaps there. Um, I see the reverse more often. I see folks who already own individual long-term care or already maybe own another group policy who are asking, should I add on to this? And that's why we make long-term care specialists part of group enrollments, to be consultants, to stand by. And, it's somebody you can hand your policy to and say, number one, is this any good? Number two, is it worth adding something onto this given that, I have little to no underwriting and seems relatively cheap to me, right? Um, I think we're going to see it more and more. We just don't have enough data to know, how many people are going to do individual planning on top of group plans. Um, but I have a feeling since we're reaching a younger age, especially through group, through, working with employers, it's far more likely because they've been educated on long-term care once before, right? So many folks start their individual long-term care planning journeys with either a personal experience or, really needing to know long-term care 101. So you get 101 out of the way earlier in life. As income increases and allows, you may see more of a want to do long-term care planning. Super good question. Um, and yeah, I mean, product fit for group is a totally different discussion, but I think group products are developed in a way where, they're easy to access, easy acceptance, but you're probably going to want to do a little bit more planning. But
Hmm.
yeah, part of what do you own already? That's part of the art and science of finding a fit, right? Let's find something that fits like a glove. If you've got something that's pretty rich, maybe you do just patch it up with something small like a short-term care. Or, maybe we have a need to do more planning, but we need to do it efficiently, right? It's all about fitting the puzzle pieces together. And that's why we see so many long-term care specialists with so many years of experience. It does take time to be able to put together all those puzzle pieces and understand quickly, like who you're talking to and what the fit may be for them. All this takes a lot of practice. So, any little tools you can use, information you can use, experts you can lean on to help you boil down that process quicker, you kind of get a leg up that way.
Can I add something?
Of course you can. I would love for you to add
I
something.
think I think it's a bigger picture of that is I do get calls from people who say, "Hey, I bought a group plan whenever ago, and now my mom's needing care and it costs $12,000 a month and my plan only pays
Mm,
$3,000 a month. What can I do to add more to it?" So then when you're talking to people when they're buying group plans, you tell them you're probably going to get to a point where you think this isn't enough, and that's when we're going to talk again and we're going to create a stronger plan for you. But let's get this in place now.
right. Yeah, it's super good point. And it's not like I don't know. I'm just trying to relate it to another like buying a new phone. I got a new phone recently and I'm still like, oh, this feels super new and I'm like going out of my way to use it a little bit more often and things like that. But once you buy a long-term care policy, especially one like through your employer, are you taking it out of the drawer 2 months later and looking at it and reading through it and being like, oh, I love this. Sometimes something happens that makes us realize, oh, I do remember that time. I do remember looking at my pay stubs and I have deduction for, a group long-term care policy. Let me pull that out of the drawer. And then you relate it to what's going on.
Mhm.
And then you're like, shoot, like, yeah, this is something. It will get something done for me if I need it, but I should probably do more. So yeah, it's a super good point. It's like a reference point almost.
Mhm.
Planting our gardens, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, All right. If nobody has anything else they would like to volunteer or ask, I think it's quite all right to give you 8 or 9 minutes back in your day. So I hope this helped you understand just conceptually how I think of finding product fits. I think there's an art to it. I think there's a science to it. It's a little of both. I think how you use them and how you create your own is kind of up to you. But there's always ways we can kind of learn from each other. There's always tools we can use to help. But at the end of the day, I think how good of a job you do at gathering information and what you do with that information is super, super key. And always kind of be looking and listening to the client because it's their choice, right? We have
Mhm.
plenty of sessions kind of based around that. So, I hope everybody enjoyed. Next week we have I believe it is Rob Johnson joining us from Lincoln. Let me double check. Yep, it'll be call with Lincoln and Rob Johnson. And then the week after that, we have Miss Linda Tallheimer who's going to take us through an agent session on John Hancock's Life Care. So still fairly new product. We had Kim Lips on the call not too long ago to talk about it from the carrier perspective, but I thought that one needed an agent session. So that's the next couple weeks you can look forward to. So everybody
Awesome.
be well, and we'll talk to you this time next week. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.